of it back in those days, almost 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that sophistication, in its elemental sense, is the antithesis of mystical.
Well, yes and no. The ancients forever have, our ancestors all the way back, have tried to understand the universe they were in and have asked these deep questions. Who are we? How did we get here? Where are we going? What is this really all about? As they looked into the heavens. And they came up with the best answers they could come up with at that point in time. And certainly using these deep intuitive impressions, or psychic stuff, let's use that word for a minute, even though I don't like those words, that deep intuitive stuff, they came up with not bad answers. And frankly, in the last 1,000 years, and the big question that we really haven't been able to properly answer even today is, why are we conscious, and what is consciousness in the larger scheme of things? Is it really the fundamental stuff, or is it a product of the accretion and evolution of energy matter? Now, there's both sides of the coin have adherents. I happen to be of this school, and my own work suggests that consciousness is evolving right along with the complexity of matter. As star systems evolve, we have become far more knowledgeable. We have learned how to use our science to use the protocols of science to test and to know and to understand. And the ancients did the best they could, but they didn't have the tools we have today. And this intuitive faculty, and let me use a little metaphor to help get this across, we call our intuition our sixth sense. And since we now understand it's more based upon quantum entanglement and principles, it should be called our first sense, because it was around before this planet was around. The quantum entanglement that subsequently ends up being the basis of our real intuitive or basic knowing, the way we know things. And it should be called our first sense. And our sensory mechanisms, our 5 normal senses, are based upon our planetary environment and the properties of that, whereas our basic intuitive sense is based upon the quantum mechanical entanglement and the properties that go with that.
Well, it
so
seems
it's quite a different thing.
Well, yeah, it seems like in both cases you seem to be looking at that again from a scientific point of view, because that doesn't, just the biomechanical efforts of the brain and the center of consciousness, which may be developing in an evolutionary sense. All those are sort of they don't go into what I could see as a mystical. They seem to be as a scientific explainable condition.
Well, and I personally feel that my credo, my approach to it, is that the universe is knowable, and that our tools of science are our modern way for the last 400 years, even with flaws, of understanding it. And we do that through postulate. Then we test the postulate with experiment, and we look for anomalies, and we revise the postulate and do some more experiment. In other words, and doing that in a public venue, and testing and retesting and repostulating, and it's building our paradigm. And that has been the way science has matured and grown for 400 years, and it's the way we will eventually understand the universe. But we have to learn to use our intuitive and our experimental together, as opposed to two separate things. Going back to René Descartes in the late 16th century, who said body, mind, physicality, spirituality are two different realms of reality. And we have lived with that for 400 years. Now the good part, excuse me, the good part is that conclusion got the Inquisition off the backs of the intellectuals of the late 16th, early 17th century, and allowed science to arise. The bad part is that because of that, mind has been a religious, philosophic subject, and materialism has been the product of science. And the universe is both. It is both non-material as the thought process, and the material, which is what we see around us. And they call it the Cartesian dualism, that body and mind were two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do, and that's my dyadic model, is put them back together and say, no, they're two faces of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We know and we exist because of energy and the facets of energy that's in our universe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's taken us at this point in history. But we're still, in my opinion, just barely out of the trees. We think we're pretty smart, but we really aren't yet.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, do you believe in miracles?
Well, I think some of our real breakthroughs might be considered that, but I think it's just starting to understand the real nature, deep nature of the universe that we live in.
So you're saying that there really isn't a miracle, other than a miracle is what it is until you have the deeper understanding of what happened.
Deeper understanding of what it really is, right?
Okay.
And how it happens.
Okay, because I noticed that the endorser of your book on the front page calls your book miraculous. So if you didn't believe in the miraculous, then you may not believe in your own book.
Well, okay, a little bit. That's a nice exaggerated metaphor.
Okay. Okay. Hey, we've got questions coming in for you from our live chat line, which is full of people right now, in our incoming inbox and our fast blast. One question we have for you: when you were going out in space, did you ever hear any voice?
I'm sorry. Repeat it.
Yeah, we have a question from the live chat line that's running right now on our website. There's a group of people that are listening to the program while chatting with each other. A listener would like to know, when you were in space, did you hear any voices?
Nope.
Okay.
Not except no one except the radio and my partners.
Okay. I was wondering if, when you were having a metaphysical experience, were you by yourself, or were you in the room in the space capsule with other people, or were you on the moon when this happened? Your first one?
Well, I don't know what you're referring to. I didn't hear anything except my partners and the radio.
Mm-hmm. All right. You said that you experienced some sort of ecstasy. Is that how you describe an immediate, infinite understanding of something? Would that be a good description of that, or how would you describe the ecstasy feeling?
Well, let me just set it up and describe it the way it really happened. Let's not to get carried away with it. After all the work was done, and remember that my job was, as a lunar module pilot, my job was a lunar spacecraft, and being expert in the lunar surface activities and knowing all of that like the back of my hand. So that when we left the moon and started home, the major part of my work was done, and I was a systems engineer, as it were, on a well-functioning spacecraft coming home. So I had a little more time and a little more relaxed demeanor to be able to look out the window and observe the heavens. And the position that we were in coming home, we were flying in the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is the plane that contains the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, but we were oriented perpendicular to it and rotating in order to keep the thermal balance on the spacecraft. Now, what that caused to happen was every 2 minutes as we rotated, here was a magnificent picture of the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens. Absolutely overwhelming. And our listeners have to realize that in space, you see things 10 times as clear and 10 times as bright as you do up on the highest mountain on the clearest night, because of the lack of intervening atmosphere. So it's a really overwhelming, magnificent view. And because of my training in astronomy, as I looked at this, I realized that the molecules of my body and the molecules in the bodies of my partners in the spacecraft had all been manufactured in some ancient generation of stars. That's how matter's manufactured in our universe. And suddenly, instead of being an intellectual knowledge, it became a very personal